Welcome to Cosmic Roadmap. I'm your host, Melissa Lambor, Reiki Astro Geo Guide and author. I support endless wanderers with where they are meant to be in the world. This podcast is for the digital nomad, the avid traveler, and aspiring globetrotter who is seeking their next destination on planet Earth. Join us as we venture around the world through people's stories and how astrogeography has connected them to their planetary energies and purpose. My special guest today is Kaewsith. She is also known as Jumakae, is a professional artist, wellness consultant, and storytelling coach. After spending her 20s as an artist and community organizer inside of nonprofit organizations, she began craving an alternative narrative to healing and justice beyond the struggle. Curiosity led her back to Thailand, where she studied with a traditional midwife to learn the ways of her ancestors. That's when she realized that all of our ancestors were entrepreneurial, filling a need in the community through their sacred offerings, thus sparked her calling to assist others in remembering their magic. And thank you so much, June, for being on. You were on my radar since Luna Love's Oracular Leadership Summit, which was at one of my lowest points in my life. And we've had full conversations about this, how I just didn't understand my identity, especially being a child of immigrant parents. And we connected deeply over that. So welcome. If people have listened to my first episode, her quote from Lineage Speaks is in there. So I started off with her beautiful words and welcome. So let us know how you've been since your Astro Geo session and all your travels as you connect through all your Astro Geo lines.
Can you remind me what those words were?
Yes, I can definitely read them.
Sometimes I say things not realizing that they're quotable, and I feel like I'm proud of that because it just speaks to how sometimes we want to be so perfectly scripted without trusting whatever it is that surfaces from our throat, which really is from our heart. And from our womb space is exactly whatever was needed in that present moment. So I'm like, oh my gosh, you quoted something I said. I wonder what that was.
And the beautiful part is that as I was birthing this podcast, Cosmic Roadmap, like the word came through during our mentorship this past fall. And then Passport to Purpose was something that also came through. And that was something that you mentioned. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to use that, but I don't know how, right? We were talking about like freebies and this and that. And so it's just beautiful how things evolve into what they're meant to be. But I'll share your words that you actually wrote in my journal, in the Story Medicine journal, right before our mentorship, our Roots to Rise mentorship. You are a global citizen of the world, connecting us back home to the cosmos, irregardless of where our roots have been planted. You remind us that we have always belonged beyond flesh and bone. I'm so excited for others to receive what you have to offer as you map us back to our Dharma. Jumakae.
Oh my gosh, words cast spells, because look at you today. What a privilege, what an honor. And my intention is to just see in others what they are still learning to see within themselves. And that's what lights me up so much about this work. And everything I say is absolutely genuine. And so I remember when I wrote those words, it was a result of just the few interactions I had with you, and not even attaching myself to whether or not we were even going to work together. It's just like, I cannot let this human being go without acknowledging how freaking magical and gifted they are. And if anything, let that be the one thing that I leave them with. And what an absolute privilege that you chose to continue the journey with me. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. And I also wouldn't have been able to receive your medicine of astrogeography, which I had no clue about prior to us connecting. Thank the cosmos.
Yes, exactly. Now you're part of my cosmic family. So through our session, we talked about Hawaii. That was a place that you had been to earlier in the year or last year. And now you'll be going to Peru, and you're doing retreats in also Joshua Tree. So these were some of the places that we touched upon. And Joshua Tree, since you're in the midst of planning your retreat in Joshua Tree,
I am.
That's essentially where your moon node is, like your purpose. And you also have a Neptune line there as well. So you're tapping into spirituality. So is that a place that has been like deep, like close to your heart? Is that why you're finally creating something there?
Let me tell you the way that the ancestors guide us. So I was recently in Tulum and I was there for a business retreat. But prior to me landing in Cancun, the
It was the
plane,
cocoon.
it's so symbolic. It really did feel like a cocoon because I felt like I was just questioning, what is it I'm doing? What is the next direction? And while people can see the highlight reels of us traveling, seeing new places, living our best lives, what they don't see is that whenever we're traveling anywhere, it's not that we completely leave our problems and our pain behind. It comes with us. If anything, being in a new environment just helps to rewire our mind to know that there is new territory that's possible.
Yeah.
And so that's the beauty of traveling, but you can't run from your own stuff.
And
And
that's something that I'll always tell to my clients. Like we have to work on the inner world before you connect with the outer world. So there's harmony, because it's true.
yeah.
The problems will follow
Yeah.
you.
Last summer, I had just gotten out of a 10-year relationship. And in that transition of questioning whether or not this was going to be something that would continue, I went to Hawaii, which I later learned is actually it represents the heart chakra. And some of my best friends live there. And so I spent my birthday there last June thinking it was only going to be a 10-day trip, but that 10 days turned into a month. I didn't get on my return flight. And it was a place that felt like home to me. And I want to be very mindful of saying this about Hawaii because there is a call to action from the indigenous people of that land, the Native Hawaiians, that are saying, mainlanders, stay where you are. There's too many of you here. Right. And so I don't want to bypass that. But what made it feel like home for me was when I remember spending a week at the Hawaii Spiritual Center. And as I first walked onto this land, I could hear the language of my ancestors. And this is literal, by the way, because it turns out that land was being tended to by Thai and Laotian elders who had migrated to Hawaii. Most, if not all of them, are actually refugees who fled the secret war. Right. If you're not familiar with the secret war, it happened during the Vietnam War. It's not something that we learn about in our history books. It's when the United States government bombed Laos. Laos is one of the most heavily bombed countries to date by the US government. Anyways, I'm here and I'm like, whoa, this feels like my ancestral homeland. The weather, the food, the fruit, the language.
It was like that deja vu moment. Yeah.
It was a complete deja vu. The yurt that I stayed in was in front of this Buddhist altar that was the entrance to what is called Sacred Falls. And so I would sit with this altar and I would sit with the land and I would just remember. It was just a deep remembering. And I did a mini psilocybin journey, which I'll go into, about how plant medicine has also been so integral to my healing, but because of the preparation work I've done leading up to it. And I feel the presence of my grandmothers, my great grandmothers come through me. Why? Because at that time, my mother was also in and out of the emergency room. I couldn't even be at home with her because she was in the hospital in isolation. And so while the highlight reels showed me being in Hawaii, living my best life inside, I was questioning whether or not I would even have a mother to come home to. And the grandmothers of my lineage spoke through me saying, what are you worried about? It's okay. We've got you. We've never left you. We will welcome her when she returns home.
Oh my gosh.
And it was when I came back, left my relationship, moved back in with my parents, and then coming back to me about to land in Cancun is when the tears were just flowing. I cried during the whole flight because my mom had been in a battle with her health the past 6 months from me being in Hawaii up into December, me going to Mexico. And I was right when I got reception, I'm scrolling through Airbnb, wondering first of all, wondering where's my business going to be 6 months from today, especially if I'm going through all of these things. And you know what? Just book a retreat venue and then you'll figure it out from there. You'll figure it out whether or not you're going to get the clients, you'll figure out what your program is. And then this dream venue pops up. It's a new venue in Joshua Tree. And it's called the Joshua Tree Gaia Villa. And I book it. And then next thing you know, I get a text message from the Airbnb host that says, actually, let me rephrase this. This happens a week later when I come back from Tulum. Tulum was a whole journey within itself. I did my first combo ceremony, which is frog medicine. And I'm just like, why do people torture themselves for enlightenment? I hated it. I'm like, I'm never doing it again. But then within the week of me coming back, I ended up filling my program, my newest program, which is Bud to Blossom, with my dream clients when I was questioning whether or not people would want to work with me, when I felt like I was still figuring out my personal life. And that's the thing. People think that in order for you to have a business, that your life needs to be perfectly put together. But I've realized that my medicine is being able to show up exactly as I am. I don't shy away from these stories of talking about what's happening in my personal life, because I want my students, I want my community to know that all of you is welcome here. It's what it means to be human. And so my program fills up within a week. And that very same day where I enrolled my final person, I get a text message from the Airbnb host that says, hey, just checking in to see if you need support with filling up this retreat. And we're so excited to have you. Oh, no, thank you. I just filled it today, but I'm just curious, where are your ancestors from? I love asking that question. She texts me back saying, I was born on a Thai refugee camp, but my ancestors are from Cambodia, except that is a part of my identity that I'm still learning about and wanting to reclaim. My best friend, one of my best friends that I stayed with while I was in Hawaii, she is Cambodian and she is launching her vegan catering company. And I was like, you're in luck, because actually our chef is Cambodian, flying in.
Wow.
And I'm from Thailand, and I have a TED Talk called How to Connect with Your Ancestors. And she had been so disconnected from the Cambodian community that I'm just telling her all these documentaries to watch as well. If y'all don't know, I actually spent a considerable amount of time in Cambodia and Thailand. I used to go back and forth between here and there for the past 10 years. Pandemic hit. I helped to run an NGO, a non-government organization out there that was teaching street kids how to break dance in Cambodia. And that was a huge part of my 20s, being in the hip hop community in Southeast Asia, here, also in Southern California, until transitioning into the work that I do today. And so I just celebrate the seeds that my younger self has planted and how it has led into my medicine today.
I was going to say that makes so much
ahead.
sense, because you have your Pluto energy right through, it was Thailand and also Cambodia. So that's all about transformation and rebirth. And it's almost like you were going through that rebirth process to finally like what you're going to go into.
Yeah. And then feeling the grief of not being able to be in my ancestral homeland right now, and the rupture that I'm experiencing today within my family of my parents getting older and questioning when are they going to be able to go back. I hear it from my father all the time. I'm learning that this is actually common with a lot of immigrant parents. It's like when they get frustrated, they're like, forget it. I'm leaving this country. Yeah. I'm going back.
Right.
Yes. Or you can't find me. Does your mom do that? I'm going back to Guatemala.
Yeah, she'll be like looking at places. She's like, this one looks nice down in Antigua. And I'm like, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I need to find a way to get y'all back to the motherland because our family dynamics right now are way too much for me to handle. And you need to be with your people. So now talking about Peru. Plant medicine is still fairly new to me. I'm actually in a psychedelic liberation training program right now because the ways that I see plant medicine being talked about still feels very, it just,
There's
it's,
some taboo around it. Yeah.
there's taboo,
Mhm.
and also we're still not acknowledging accessibility and how race, privilege, and
Exactly.
oppression plays a role into how it is we treat these great teachers. And because of the downloads I have received and the few times I have journeyed, is what we're calling it,
Mm.
the messages from my ancestors, from spirit, these other dimensions, that for me is just has been an affirmation that, oh, we exist in multiple realities. And also, how is it that we root ourselves in this one and use the teachings from these other dimensions to really guide humanity towards liberation, beginning with ourselves. I know that the only way for me to be able to do that is to continue cultivating a deeper relationship with them. And it turns out that my really good friends who have also been on this journey are hosting a plant medicine retreat for women of color. They're both two queer Black women in Peru, in Sacred Valley. And so I'll be going there in November to be in community with others who are also not just using it as a way to escape, but as a teacher so that we can continue doing this liberation work and not just talking about it, but allowing ourselves to feel it in our cellular being. And by the way, I've been able to get to those states purely through meditation as well. But when I look at the temples like Angkor Wat in Guatemala, the pyramids of Giza, it's been confirmed to me that these downloads, these visions actually came from being in these states of consciousness that are often accessed through earth medicine, through plant medicine, which has been criminalized today for a good reason because of the ways that it's abused. And also it's the overuse of it, and also because it's been hella colonized to where now we see communities looking for ways to escape through other unhealthy means. I can't believe I'm talking about this on a podcast, by the way.
I love you. But you know what? I'm just seeing like all the connections as you're speaking, because Joshua Tree, you have that moon node spirituality line from Neptune. So tapping into your spirituality there in Joshua Tree. And then you went to Cancun. I just pulled up Cancun for you. That was your Neptune line, another spirituality line. So it's almost like you keep cracking open the spirituality as you keep going through these places. And then now Peru, that's where your moon node, once again, so similar to Joshua Tree. So I'm making all these connections. So once again, tapping into your purpose. And your moon node was also in Cambodia. So when I was looking at that in that region, you're constantly tapping into your moon node. And it's funny that we also have a connection with the moon node because my moon node runs right in southern Thailand, northern Malaysia, where my partner's from, and finally reached out to you. And I had this deep connection, right? Like I almost felt like we were cosmic, sisters at some point.
We totally are.
Because of that. As you keep diving into your spirituality, you're diving into this plant medicine. It just makes complete sense.
And I feel such a connection as well to Guatemala because when I studied abroad there in college, I was the only person in my program that didn't speak Spanish. However, all of my classmates were white passing. And so we would go on hikes everywhere. People would speak to me in Quechua. They would think that I was one of them. And then I remember looking at this map where I saw that Thailand and Guatemala were basically like along the same line on the planet. And I was like, no wonder why y'all look like my aunties and my cousins.
The same with Faris, my partner. They came onto the bus. We were going to Tikal and they're like, no, it's Sunday. You don't have to pay in Spanish. And he's what?
I love it.
So he was the mute Guatemalan as we traveled around.
Yes,
because
that was me.
he looked, yeah, he looked Guatemalan. Like they thought he was one of them.
Yeah. And that's the thing where I remember also walking the lands of the Gauls, thinking to myself, this feels so familiar. And it wasn't until later, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I recall is that the dimensions of the Gal are basically the exact same thing as Angkor Wat. And I just remember seeing the faces of the temples
Yeah.
in the temples at the Gal saying, this looks so much like the carvings on the faces in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, there's definitely a connection because when I was in Egypt and Cairo visiting the pyramids, there was definitely a connection between Tikal, the ruins, and I think Orion. And I started our program,
Orion. Yeah.
Orion. Yeah.
Yes.
I started it when I was in Cairo, when I was in right next to the pyramids. So it's just this beautiful around the Lion's Gate. Yeah. I don't know if you remember, I was like
Yes.
rushing to get back to our call while I was in the midst of Giza trying to figure out where my hotel was. But yeah, there was that
Yeah.
connection during the Lion's Gate with Orion's belt and just that cosmic connection between Guatemala and Egypt. So yeah, there's definitely something there.
Yeah. And something else that I want to name, because I have been just thinking about this so much as I've been navigating being a human amidst a healer, is honoring the sacredness in the mundane moments when we're not traveling. Because I'm in a moment in my life at the time of this recording where I am now the caretaker to my elders. Whereas when I thought I was going to come home, my parents are going to lovingly welcome me with open arms. Come home, you're finally home, daughter. Instead, it's almost like the opposite is true, where I feel like I am transitioning from this maiden to this matriarch, wanting to build my dreams, which I do feel like I am doing, and also needing to manage responsibilities at home. And I know that there's many people listening who may also be questioning, like, who am I to travel when I have a family to tend to, when I have so much debt, all these other stories that we tell ourselves. And something that I have learned is that sometimes it just means booking the trip, putting it on your calendar so that you have something to look forward to, instead of making up all of these excuses as to why you can't. Because once you make that commitment, it's like, for me, okay, I booked this retreat not knowing whether or not my program was going to fill. I booked this retreat, that one I'm facilitating, but the one I'm receiving in Peru, I'm like, I don't know where the income is going to come in. I don't know what my life is going to be like then, but let me just put it in my calendar so that I have no excuses whatsoever. I will find a way to make it work. Yes, I can back out, but now as I'm going through these moments in my everyday life that can seem so mundane, from me driving to my office, from me like doing my laundry, just doing human things, from me doing end of life planning for my parents, that these are the moments that are all a part of you creating your legacy. The things that we don't want to look at, the things that we would easily run from by just moving to another country or like scrolling on Netflix. These mundane moments is actually the hardest work, of the stillness, of
being comfortable
that,
with yourself just in the quiet moments. And
being comfortable with ourselves, finding home wherever it is we go, because in our bodies is a vast universe that is also waiting to be explored, that most of us don't even take the time to sit with. And so that way, when I arrive to these new locations, it's just amplifying what I've already been embodying for myself, the work that I've been doing within.
Yes. And I love that you mentioned amplify, because that's essentially where I lead my clients to these places, and it's to amplify the goals that they have already set in mind. With my recent program, Passport to Purpose, it's just allowing them to integrate and get deeper into those goals, find that cosmic connection throughout the world. So I love that so much.
Yeah, otherwise we're just colonizers all over again. People
Exactly. And
who
that's what I want to
travel the
avoid.
world, these travel bloggers, and how there's like oftentimes you see very little acknowledgement of the local people and what
Exactly.
they're going through. And I'm very sensitive when I travel, especially every time I've gone back to Cambodia. It's just, oh, my heart sinks seeing the
Mhm.
impact of genocide and war. And of course, that's why I ended up going back, not because, oh my God, I love Cambodia so much. And
Yeah,
yes, it's an absolutely beautiful country, but I felt like I had to find a way to give back,
exactly.
especially with my privilege, having a US passport. And I'm really grateful for the time I had in my life there. I feel like that chapter of my life is like complete, has transitioned, but it has informed so much of the medicine it is I have to share today.
Yeah, and with my work, that's what I've been doing. I've been leading people down to places that they may want to start a nonprofit, right? These unlikely places. And that's where I want it to blossom, to be more of a social impact than just bouncing
Yeah.
around and going for that all-inclusive
Right.
trip. That's not where
Yeah.
it's all about
And
purposeful, conscious travel.
and being intentional about where
Intentional.
we divest our own resources. Okay,
Mhm.
if you're renting a hotel, if you're staying with a family, are the funds going directly to the
Right.
community? Do they have a say of decisions that are made in their neighborhood and their community? Because I feel like one of the things that we also get to be conscious of is when we are going into these places with the savior mentality versus listening to the locals, asking them what it is they need. Is it really another nonprofit or is it
Rather than
jobs?
just throwing money at the problem. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
not
And that's what led me into entrepreneurship, is that realization that, oh my gosh, we have so many outsiders coming in. I experienced this in my own community back when I was a community organizer here in Long Beach, where my job was to organize the Southeast Asian community. I did workshops in the Cambodian, Thai, Laotian, Vietnamese communities about violence prevention and healthy relationships. And the ways that the funding came in was public health telling me what to do in my community without having any direct relationship with them. And of course, I was kindly freed from that job. I was fired, but I like to say I was freed, only to realize, oh my gosh, I don't want to go through this trauma again. Like people who have access to money and resources telling me what to do, and then my life being informed by whether or not they're going to fund me, dependent on whether or not I met their deliverables. And what would it look like for me to no longer have to continuously tell the story of our trauma and our pain to get seen, to actually say, hey, we matter? What would it look like for us to actually become the resources it is we think is lacking? And that's what led me back to Thailand 5 years ago
yes.
to study with an indigenous Thai midwife, to learn the ways that our ancestors healed each other and themselves with their hands and their heart prior to us calling these 1-800 hotline numbers, prior to us going to hospitals or depending on nonprofits as a way to save us. And I just noticed the healers in these communities were fading. Why? Because suddenly the government is saying, oh, you're going to need accreditation if you want to keep practicing
Mm.
this medicine. How many midwives, how many other traditional healers are losing this practice that has been passed down for many generations because the government said, you can't do that. We have the say. And now, me being here on occupied Chumash Tongva land, US soil, witnessing other children of immigrants or descendants of immigrants or people who are indigenous to this land that are suddenly remembering or feeling this pull to return to their roots or to their ancestors' way of being. And that doesn't mean needing to actually travel back to their ancestral
Exactly.
homeland, because the reality is a lot of people can't go back, whether it's due to finances or immigration, adoption, coming from a lineage of where your people were forcibly removed from your country, but follow that inkling and know that this is what it feels like for the ancestors to be moving through you, speaking through you. And what I love so much about your medicine, Melissa, is the way that you encourage others to reconnect with their roots through music, through food, through books, through art. And there's
Right.
habits that many of us have where we don't even realize, oh my gosh, like this is actually something that is ancestral to me. And so allowing yourself to lead with that curiosity and that play is where so much of the clarity will emerge of where it is you come from.
Yes, I love that. And it just reminds me another connection that we have, that we entered into doula programs, right? And into becoming a doula, a birth doula. And a decade ago, I went into a doula training program, not knowing why. Like and I feel like maybe ancestrally, there were many midwives, right? Many healer in my lineage going back to Guatemala. So I love that sometimes it is ancestral, or it is connected to your astrogeo lines, that there is a connection there. Maybe you're tapping into your purpose and it led you to Thailand or wherever it may
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had no idea that my great grandmother was a midwife until I went on this training, which happened during my Saturn return, by the way, 29
Right.
years old. And I came back and my mom was like, why did you go back when I could have told you? Of course, you're not going to tell me. Our parents don't realize, especially our immigrant parents don't realize the value in their story. I didn't know my birth story until my 30th birthday,
Wow.
when my mom and I were co-facilitating a doulas of color training together, which I felt so unqualified for because I had just came back from Thailand and my mom had just told me that she was a doula when she was a little girl in her village that would assist her grandmother. And how come I never heard this? Oh, I didn't think that you'd care. I didn't think that part of my life is important to you.
And it reminds
And then
me of
to
me talking to Ferris when I was taking this training. He's, oh yeah,
yeah.
like I watched my mom for a baby, and I'm just like, what? The placenta,
What?
this, that, all these things that
Yeah.
were foreign to me, and to him were just
Yeah.
second nature. So I completely connect with that.
They're just second nature. It's not a big deal. And then to hear how I came into the world full of pain,
Mhm.
full of trauma in my mom's womb space, and then understanding why she never wanted me to have children gave me a better understanding of why she was so resentful. She didn't have the village around her, like how it was like back in the motherland. And so our generation in particular is experiencing this unprocessed grief of us being pulled from the umbilical cord of our motherland.
Yes.
And so by us even like sharing, exchanging these stories is a huge part of the intergenerational and the collective healing that we get to experience.
Yeah, and it reminds me because my mother also had me through C-section and then a traumatic one with my sister. So I think that
Me
also
too.
pushed me into, yeah, into becoming a doula. I
Yeah.
didn't end up working as a doula, but just going through that training was, yeah, exactly. But now we're birthing other things into the world, and that's the beautiful part of it. So
Exactly. Look, if every single person can actually take part in the doula training, not like you have to make a career out of this, but
exactly.
just to have that wisdom under your belt for, because all of us came from a womb. Humans will continue, reincarnated ancestors will continue arriving through the portal of the womb, the yoni. And will you be prepared for when that time comes, whether it's with a friend or family member or even yourself, because that is where so much of the trauma is informed. Our birth story shapes so much of how it is we carry ourselves through the world. If we can catch a returning ancestor as soon as they land on Earth side and let them know that they are safe, We've got you. That may prevent so much suffering, not just for this individual, but for the planet, because violence, systemic oppression, all of this is bred from trauma. The decisions that our politicians make, that leaders make, that impact the most marginalized communities are oftentimes because of their own inner child healing wounds that have never been tended to.
Amen. So true.
Which is also ancestral. But in this lifetime, this is our
Yes.
opportunity to say it stops here.
Thank you, June. And how can people find your offerings? What's going on for you right now? How can they reach you and tap into your amazing story medicine?
While I am not a birth doula today, I
Yes.
am a self-proclaimed life doula. And so my medicine is supporting other radical healers with finding clarity in their message, their medicine, their dharma, and confidence in their speaking, not just from the throat, but from the womb space where so many of our stories are held, so that they can heal generations before and after them. And I do that through, as of now, my two main programs, which is Roots to Rise for people who are just stepping into this frequency, people who already identify as healers or are struggling with how to identify as a healer. You have all the skills, maybe you have the certifications, but you're wanting to learn how to communicate what it is you do. And maybe you're still finding clarity in your offerings. And for that, we begin with your story. What is your story medicine? Why is it you're feeling called to this path? And how is it that we can acknowledge your ancestral roots and allow the offerings to be birthed from your story? Just like witnessing you, Melissa, in the ways that I just went in on your story, only to then understand, oh, okay. So it's not like you're using astrogeography as a way to say, yes, let's disappear into outer space and connect with the stars. It's so much more than that. It's been informed by how you came into this world, how your mother immigrated to this country, your identity as a biracial woman, and how, wow, colonialism has really messed us up into making us believe that we are separate. And yes, let's acknowledge why it is. Let's acknowledge racism. Let's acknowledge white supremacy. And also, as we do this work, let's remember together our interconnectedness. So little spiel on that. And then Bud to Blossom is more for people who have already planted those seeds, have witnessed them blossomed, and are looking for sustainability or scaling. And it's more of an intimate mentorship with me. But aside from that, I have my podcast as well, where I interview people about their story medicine. So you can find that at yourstorymedicine.com, where you will also get a guided meditation I created on how to connect with your own ancestors. And hit me up on Instagram at Jumakae, because I am going to be doing some more parties throughout the year that are going to be free and accessible to everybody who is also wanting to cultivate a deeper connection with their ancestors, their story medicine, and stepping into entrepreneurship, not solely for business or money making, but to really create a legacy for themselves and the future generations. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for being on today. I'll definitely follow Jumakae. And remember, lineage goes beyond your ancestors. You are meant to connect to the cosmos so you may finally find your cosmic family. Until next time. Thank you for listening to Cosmic Roadmap. If you're curious about astrogeography and where you're meant to be on the planet, go to cosmicroadmap.com to download your free passport to purpose. You can also book a session with me where we can explore your own cosmic roadmap and chart your next destination in business, love, and life.